The smell of hot soup filled the kitchen that night. I remember carefully setting the table, placing the toasted bread on a small plate, making sure the napkins were folded just right. After all, I knew how easily he lost his temper. My son, the boy I had once carried in my arms, was now a grown man who demanded perfection in everything, especially from me. He came home late from work, his tie loosened, his phone still in his hand. Without greeting me, he sat at the table and picked up the spoon. I stood nearby, waiting, hoping that for once, maybe tonight, things would be calm. But as soon as he put that first spoonful in his mouth, his expression changed. His face twisted with disgust. "What the hell is this?" he shouted, spitting the soup back into the bowl. "It has no salt. Are you completely useless?" I froze, my hands trembling. "I'm sorry, son. I must have forgotten. Let me just." I didn't even finish the sentence before he stood up, towering over me like a storm ready to break. He grabbed the bowl with both hands and threw it straight into my face. The hot liquid burned my cheek, the pieces of porcelain slicing into my lip. I gasped, covering my mouth as the metallic taste of blood filled it. "You worked 40 years, and you can't even make decent soup? You're pathetic," he screamed, grabbing my arm so tightly that I knew it would bruise. He shoved me against the wall, the back of my head hitting the cold tiles. Stars exploded in my vision, and for a moment, I thought I might collapse, but he didn't stop. Slap after slap landed on my face, his rage spilling out as if I were nothing more than a punching bag. My ears rang, my vision blurred. I tried to shield myself with my hands, but it only made him angrier. When he finally let go, I slid down the wall and landed on the floor, my body shaking, my lip bleeding, my cheek throbbing. He stood over me, breathing heavily. Then, as if nothing had happened, his face relaxed. He picked up a napkin from the table, crouched down, and dabbed the blood from my mouth. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered in a calm voice that made my skin crawl. "I just get frustrated with you sometimes. I know you can do better. This is for your own good." Then he stood up, straightened his tie, and walked upstairs to his room. Within minutes, I heard the door close and the silence of his sleep, and there I was, a 61-year-old mother sitting on the kitchen floor, using an old rag to wipe away not just the blood from my lips, but also the soup from the tiles, the broken pieces of porcelain scattered like fragments of my dignity. As the clock ticked past midnight, I stared at the floor and wondered how my life had come to this. The boy I had once rocked to sleep, the child I had worked double shifts to feed, the son I had protected from the world, had now become the monster inside my own home. My cheek burned, my arms ached, and every bone in my body screamed in pain. But none of that compared to the weight pressing on my heart. The weight of humiliation, the weight of knowing that in his eyes I was no longer his mother. I was nothing more than his maid, his punching bag, his prisoner. I wanted to scream, to call someone, to run, but instead, I cleaned up the mess, one broken shard at a time, terrified that if I left even a single piece out of place, tomorrow's punishment would be even worse. When the floor was spotless and the blood was gone, I sat down in the silence of the kitchen, my hands shaking, my heart hollow. I thought to myself, surely this is the lowest point. Surely it can't get worse than this. But I was wrong. This was only the beginning. The morning light crept through the thin curtains, but it didn't feel like a new day. It felt like the same nightmare, stretching from one night into another. I tried to sit up in bed, but pain shot through my body. My lip was swollen, my cheek tender to the touch, and dark bruises were already blooming across my arms. Every movement reminded me of what had happened the night before, but the worst pain wasn't physical. It was the crushing humiliation, the memory of kneeling on the kitchen floor, wiping up blood and soup with the same rag, replayed in my mind like a cruel film I couldn't turn off. I had raised my son with so much love, given him everything I could, and this was what I had become, his servant, his victim. Still, I got up. At 5 in the morning, like every other day. That's what he expected. When I reached the kitchen, he was already there, sitting at the table, scrolling through his phone in his impeccable gray suit. His hair was perfectly combed, his tie sharp, his shoes polished to a shine. To the outside world, he looked like the picture of success, a young executive on his way to conquer the business world. He didn't look up when I walked in. He didn't notice my swollen lip or the bruises peeking out from my blouse. Or maybe he did notice, and he simply didn't care. "Breakfast," he said flatly, eyes still glued to his phone. "Hurry up. I have a meeting." His voice was cold, dismissive, as if nothing had happened the night before, as if he hadn't thrown hot soup in my face, as if he hadn't slapped me until my ears rang. I moved quickly, terrified of being too slow. I scrambled his eggs exactly the way he liked them, 3 spoonfuls of shredded cheese mixed in, not one more, not one less, 2 slices of toasted bread, black coffee, no sugar, everything measured to perfection, because if one thing was out of place, I knew I would pay the price. I placed the plate in front of him carefully. He ate in silence, his eyes still on his phone, his fork scraping the plate in steady rhythm. He didn't thank me. He didn't even acknowledge me. To him, I was invisible, except when I made mistakes. As I stood there watching him eat, a thought crossed my mind that made me shiver. If a stranger walked in right now, they would think we were just a normal family, a son having breakfast before work, a mother making sure everything was in order. But that stranger would never know the truth. They would never see the bruises under my sleeves. They would never hear the words he hissed at me when we were alone. They would never imagine that this polished young man, who managed million-dollar accounts at the office, was the same person who beat his mother until she bled over a bowl of soup. He put his fork down and looked at me for the first time. His eyes were sharp, calculating. "Don't forget to pay the electricity bill today," he said. "I gave you cash yesterday. Use that." I nodded, though I knew very well that the money wasn't mine. It hadn't been mine for years. Every penny of my pension went directly into his account. He gave me a small allowance for expenses, just enough to keep the lights on, but never enough for me to have control. He called it helping me manage at my age. In reality, it was another chain around my neck. "And make sure the groceries are done by noon," he added. "Savannah might come over later, and you know how she hates it when the fridge looks empty." Again, I nodded. He sipped his coffee, glanced at his watch, and stood up. "I'll be late tonight. Have dinner ready by 8. He picked up his briefcase and headed for the door. But before leaving, he turned back and gave me a look that froze me in place. That look carried a silent warning. One wrong move, one word out of place, and you'll regret it. Then he smiled, a fake, practiced smile, and left the house as if he were just another hardworking man off to a respectable job. When the door closed, I finally exhaled. My body relaxed just a little, though the fear never really went away. I stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the empty plate he had left behind, crumbs scattered on the tablecloth. I touched my bruised lip and whispered to myself, how did it come to this? How did I become a stranger in my own home? For years, I had told myself that things couldn't get worse, that if I just kept quiet, if I just obeyed, maybe one day he would calm down. Maybe one day the boy I raised would come back to me. But deep down, I knew the truth. I thought last night was the worst it could get. I was wrong. When people look at me now, they see a tired old woman. They see bruises and a trembling smile. What they don't see is the lifetime of sacrifices I made for the very son who now treats me like dirt beneath his shoes. It wasn't always like this. Ethan wasn't always like this. There was a time when he was my whole world, and I was his. His father left us when Ethan was just 8 years old. One night, a suitcase by the door, a slammed car door, and the sound of an engine fading down the street. That was how my marriage ended. From that day forward, it was just me and my little boy against the world. I worked long hours as a secretary at a prestigious law firm. I woke up before sunrise, packed his lunch, ironed his clothes, and dropped him off at school before heading to the office. Then, after 8 or 10 hours of typing, filing, and organizing other people's lives, I came home, cooked dinner, and sat with him while he did his homework. I wanted to give him everything his father couldn't. Designer clothes so he wouldn't feel different from the other kids. Piano lessons, English classes, even summer camps I could barely afford. Every penny I saved went to making sure he had opportunities I never had. And Ethan. He was sweet back then. A little demanding, yes, but loving. He'd hug me tight after school, bring me drawings with "I love you, Mom" scribbled in colorful crayons. I thought I was raising a kind, grateful boy. I thought all my sacrifices were shaping him into a better man. But maybe that was my mistake. Maybe I gave too much. Maybe I spoiled him so much that he grew up believing he deserved everything without ever lifting a finger. Years went by, and Ethan became a handsome young man with charm that could light up a room. He married young, built a promising career, and I thought, finally, my boy has made it. I felt proud, as if all my hard work had been worth it. But 3 years ago, everything changed. I still remember the night he came back to my doorstep. It was raining, and when I opened the door, I saw him standing there with a suitcase in one hand and a hollow look in his eyes. "Mom," he said softly, like the little boy he once was, "I need to stay here for a while, just until I sort things out." He told me his marriage had ended. The divorce had left him financially ruined, or so he claimed. He said he had lost his house, that he had nowhere else to go. My heart ached for him. I didn't even hesitate. "Of course, son," I said, opening my arms. "This is your home too. Stay as long as you need." I thought it would be temporary. A few months, maybe. I thought having him back home would be like old times, mother and son sharing dinners, watching television together, maybe even healing old wounds. At first, it felt almost normal. He got up early for work, came home late, and we'd share quiet meals. Sometimes he even helped me carry groceries. I thought, maybe this is our second chance. Maybe this time, we'll build the close relationship we never had. But slowly things began to change. It started with small comments. "Mom, this food is too salty." "Mom, why don't you clean the bathroom better?" "Mom, your clothes are so wrinkled it's embarrassing." Each word stung, but I brushed it off. He was stressed, I told myself, going through a divorce, working long hours. Anyone would be irritable. Then he started asking about my finances. "Mom, at your age, you shouldn't be handling cash. It's dangerous. Let me help you manage your accounts." I hesitated, but he was my son. I trusted him. I thought he was trying to protect me. So I gave him access to my bank account. He said it was temporary, just to help me out. Looking back now, I realized that was the moment everything truly shifted. Within 6 months, my pension wasn't mine anymore. The money I had worked 40 years for went directly into his account. He gave me $20 a week for personal expenses, like I was a child getting allowance. Whenever I asked about the rest, he'd say, "Mom, I'm investing it for you. Trust me. I know what I'm doing." And I believed him. Because I was his mother. Because I wanted to believe that my son would never betray me. But little by little, the boy I had raised with so much love disappeared. And in his place grew a man who saw me not as his mother, but as his property. The criticism grew sharper. The demands grew heavier. He expected dinner ready the moment he stepped inside, clothes washed and ironed, the house spotless at all times. If I slipped, if I was too slow, if I forgot something as small as a pinch of salt, his voice would rise, his eyes would darken, and I knew what was coming. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that he just needed time to get back on his feet, that once he found stability again, he'd leave and rebuild his life. But I was wrong. He didn't move out. He moved in. And with every passing week, his roots dug deeper into my house, my finances, and my freedom. The night he brought his suitcase, I thought I was opening my door to my son, I didn't know I had just invited the devil into my home. At first, it was words. Cold, sharp words that sliced into me more deeply than I wanted to admit. He called me slow, careless, embarrassing. I told myself he didn't mean it, that he was just frustrated after work. I had lived long enough to know that people say things they don't mean in moments of stress. But with Ethan, the words didn't stop. They multiplied. They became a daily storm. Then came the finances. My pension, which had once given me at least a small sense of independence, disappeared into his account. He said it was for my own good, that at my age, it wasn't safe to handle money. "Don't worry, Mom," he would say, almost tenderly. "I'll make sure everything is taken care of. You don't need to worry about bills anymore." But it wasn't about protecting me. It was about controlling me. I became dependent on him for every small expense. He gave me $20 bills as if he were doing me a favor. $20 for toiletries, for clothes, for groceries if I wanted something extra. The boy I had once fed and clothed was now rationing my life like I was a child. Then he convinced me to add his name to the deed of the house. I remember sitting at the lawyer's office, my hand shaking as I signed the papers. "Mom, it's just a precaution," he told me. "If something happens to you, it'll be easier for me to take care of everything. Don't you trust me?" And I did trust him. That was my sin. I trusted him because he was my son. I never imagined that in that moment, I was signing away the sanctuary I had built with my own blood and sweat, with the house under his control and my money flowing into his hands. There was nothing left to shield me. That's when the physical abuse began. At first, it was disguised as accidents. A push when I didn't move fast enough, a pinch on the arm when I forgot to iron his shirt, a grip on my wrist so tight I thought my bones would snap. "Stop being so dramatic," he'd say when I flinched. "I didn't even touch you that hard," but it grew. Pushes turned into slaps. Slaps turned into punches on my back, places where the bruises wouldn't show. And I endured it, convincing myself that it was just temporary, that he was under pressure, that deep down, he still loved me. Until that night with the soup, I can still feel it as if it happened yesterday. The sting of boiling liquid against my skin, the sharp pain of porcelain cutting into my lip, the dizzying shock of my own son towering over me with rage in his eyes. It wasn't just about the missing salt. It was never about the salt. It was about power. About reminding me that I no longer had any. When he threw me against the wall and my head hit the tiles, I saw stars. My ears rang, my vision blurred. For a split second, I thought I would lose consciousness, but he didn't stop. "Useless. Worthless," he screamed, each word punctuated by the sound of his hands striking my face. I remember the taste of blood filling my mouth. I remember clutching the wall, trying to steady myself, only for him to knock me down again. When he was finally done, he looked at me lying there on the floor, and then, as if a switch had flipped inside him, his face softened. He crouched down, picked up a napkin, and dabbed gently at my lip. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered, his voice low, almost tender. "I just get so frustrated. I know you can do better. It's all for your own good." And then he walked away. He climbed the stairs, closed his bedroom door, and fell asleep as though nothing had happened. Meanwhile, I stayed on the kitchen floor. My body shook. My cheek burned. My heart felt like it had been ripped out of my chest. I gathered the broken pieces of the bowl with trembling hands, cutting my fingers in the process. I wiped the soup from the tiles, my tears mixing with the stains. Every shard I picked up felt like a piece of my dignity, shattered and scattered across the floor. That night, I realized something terrifying. My son wasn't just angry. He wasn't just stressed. He wasn't just going through a difficult time. He had become something else, something darker, and yet he wasn't done breaking me. For a while, it was just me and Ethan. As painful as it was, I told myself I could endure it. I had survived worse storms in life. But then she came along, and my private prison grew even smaller. Her name was Savannah. Young, beautiful, elegant. She walked into our lives with high heels clicking against the tiles and a smile that never reached her eyes. In public, she was sweet as honey. She called me Mrs. Davis with a syrupy politeness that sounded more like mockery. "Good morning, Mrs. Davis. How are you today?" she would ask, her voice dripping with false warmth. But behind closed doors, she treated me as if I didn't exist, or worse, as if I were the maid hired to clean up after her. She'd leave her coffee cup half full on the table, lipstick smeared on the rim, and glance at me without saying a word. That was my cue. Pick it up, wash it, put it away. Sometimes she'd deliberately drop her scarf or bag on the floor, waiting for me to stoop down and pick it up, just to remind me of my place. And Ethan let it happen. No, he encouraged it. He enjoyed watching me serve her. He enjoyed seeing me invisible, voiceless, powerless. They would host dinners in my dining room, using the fine china I had saved for special occasions. Savannah's friends came dressed in designer dresses, sipping expensive wine, laughing at jokes while I hovered in the background, refilling glasses and clearing plates. I wasn't a guest in my own home. I wasn't even family. I was staff, unpaid, unseen, and unwanted. The contrast between their life and mine was unbearable. Ethan drove a car that cost more than I had earned in years. Savannah wore jewelry that probably cost more than my entire pension. Their closets overflowed with luxury, while I lived off the $20 he handed me each week. Once, I asked him for a little more, just enough to buy myself a new blouse for church. The one I had was so old the threads were thinning. He looked at me with disdain. "Why do you need a new blouse? You don't go anywhere. Besides, you don't look good in bright colors anymore. You're too old for that." That night, Savannah laughed when she saw me folding laundry. "You should be grateful, Mrs. Davis. Not many women your age get to live in such a beautiful house." Her words stung because I had built that house. I had bought it with decades of hard work, every overtime hour, every late night at the law firm. That house was my sanctuary, my proof that all my sacrifices had been worth something. But now it felt like a gilded cage. Every wall whispered my failures. Every room reminded me of how easily my son had stripped me of ownership, of dignity, of freedom, because it wasn't just Savannah's presence. It wasn't just the daily humiliation of being treated like a maid. It was knowing that, legally, I had nowhere to run. One afternoon, Ethan handed me papers to sign. "It's just a formality, Mom," he said, his smile calm but his eyes sharp. "In case anything happens to you, this makes sure the house stays in the family." I didn't understand the details, but I trusted him. Or maybe I was too scared to ask questions. With his voice dripping with authority, I signed. Weeks later, I discovered what I had done. By adding his name to the deed, I had given him legal control over the house. The home I had worked my entire life to buy was no longer truly mine. That realization crushed me more than any slap or insult, because bruises fade, words eventually stop echoing. But papers, signatures, legal traps, those chains don't break easily. I had thought I was trapped before. But this was different. This was a double prison. Financially, I was his hostage. Emotionally, I was his punching bag. And now, legally, I was nothing more than a tenant in my own home, living at the mercy of my own son. That night, as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling and let the truth sink in. My money was gone. My freedom was gone. And now, even the roof over my head wasn't mine anymore. He had made sure of that. He made sure I couldn't escape, even legally. It happened on a Tuesday night. Tuesdays were supposed to be light dinners, soup, salad, maybe some bread. I had prepared vegetable soup the way I always did. I thought it was fine, but to Ethan, it wasn't. He came home late, dropped his briefcase by the door, and sat at the table without a word. His tie was loosened, his face tight with stress. I placed the steaming bowl in front of him and waited, hoping he would eat without complaint. But the moment he tasted it, his face twisted in fury. "This is garbage," he roared, shoving the bowl away so hard that soup spilled across the table. "It has no flavor, no salt. Are you trying to make me sick?" I panicked. "I'm sorry, son, I'll fix it." Before I could finish, he was on his feet, his hand clamped around my arm like a vice, and he shoved me against the wall. My head smacked against the tile. Stars exploded in my vision. "You're useless," he shouted, his spit hitting my face. 40 years working as a secretary, and you can't even make a bowl of soup? What good are you?" His fist struck my shoulder, then my back. I crumpled to the floor, trying to shield myself, but the blows kept coming. The room spun. My ears rang. Each strike made me feel smaller, weaker, until I wasn't even a mother anymore. I was just an object, something he could take his anger out on. At some point, I stopped fighting. I just lay there, numb, my body screaming in pain, but my mind floating somewhere far away. A dark thought crept in. Maybe it would be easier if I just didn't wake up tomorrow. When he finally stopped, he stood over me, chest heaving. For a moment, I thought he might feel remorse, but what came next was worse than the beating. He crouched down, took my chin in his hand, and tilted my face toward the light. His eyes narrowed at the bruises forming on my cheek. "You're a mess," he said coldly. Then, in a voice that almost sounded gentle, he added, "Don't worry, I bought you something." The next morning, he handed me a small shopping bag. Inside was an expensive bottle of foundation makeup, the kind that costs more than I could ever justify spending. "It'll cover those scrapes," he said with a smile. "No one needs to know you're so clumsy." Clumsy. That was his story. That was the lie he told himself and wanted me to repeat. That I tripped, that I fell, that I was careless. "See, Mom?" he added, patting my hand. "I only want what's best for you. You need to take care of yourself." His words made me feel sick. He had broken me the night before, and now he wanted me to cover the evidence, to hide the truth behind a mask of perfect skin, and I obeyed. I stood in front of the mirror, dabbing the expensive foundation across my face, hiding the purple marks, painting over the pain. I practiced my smile, the one I wore when neighbors asked how I was doing. But that morning, something cracked inside me. As I looked at my reflection, my swollen lip, my trembling hands, I didn't recognize the woman staring back. Who was she? A servant? A shadow? A mother who had given up? I went about my chores silently, but inside, a storm was building. Later that day, I stepped outside to take out the trash. I kept my head down, hoping no one would see me. But fate had other plans. "Monica?" A voice called softly. I froze. It was Clarice, my next-door neighbor, a kind widow in her 60s, always with a warm smile and gentle eyes. She was carrying a basket of laundry. She took one look at me and stopped. Her eyes lingered on my lip, despite the makeup. She saw the way I held my arm close to my body, the stiffness in my movements. "What happened?" she asked, her voice full of concern. "Did you fall?" My heart pounded. The lies Ethan had drilled into me rose to the surface. Say it was an accident. Say you tripped. Say nothing. So I forced a smile. "Oh yes." I bumped into the closet door. "Clumsy me." Clarice frowned. Her eyes said she didn't believe me. But she didn't press. Instead, she touched my arm gently. "Well, if you ever need anything, you know where I am," she said softly. "I'm home most afternoons." Her words pierced me like sunlight through heavy clouds. Simple, ordinary words, but to me, they felt like a lifeline. For the first time in years, someone had noticed. Someone had looked at me not as invisible, not as worthless, but as a person in pain. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about her face, her eyes, the way she seemed to see straight through me. For the first time, someone looked me in the eye and saw the truth. The day after Clarice noticed my bruises, everything began to change. Until then, My nightmare had been locked behind closed doors. No one knew the truth except me and Ethan. But now, the walls were beginning to crack, and once cracks appear, light finds its way in. It started with Clarice herself. She wasn't the type to pry, but she was sharp. That evening, she came by with a casserole and a smile. Ethan wasn't home yet. As she handed me the dish, her eyes flicked to the purple mark peeking out from beneath my sleeve. "Monica," she whispered, lowering her voice. "I know something isn't right. You don't have to tell me, but..." She leaned closer. "If you ever need help, I want you to know I'm listening." I wanted to collapse in her arms, to spill everything, but Ethan's voice echoed in my head. "If you ever open your mouth, you'll regret it. No one will believe you." So I smiled weakly. "Thank you, Clarice. You're very kind." But Clarice wasn't satisfied. The next night, after hearing Ethan shouting through the walls, she quietly placed a small security camera in the bushes near my kitchen window. From then on, whenever Ethan's voice thundered, whenever his words turned into threats, her little device captured it all. I didn't know about the recordings at first, but when she showed me a snippet, a clip of Ethan snarling, "If you ever tell anyone, I'll throw you out on the street, and no one will believe a crazy old woman like you," my knees nearly gave way. For the first time, there was proof. It wasn't just my word against his anymore. But that wasn't the only crack forming in Ethan's perfect mask. One morning, the phone rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. "Mrs. Davis?" a man's voice asked. "This is Adrian Castillo, accountant at Northern Business Corporation. I need to speak with you about urgent financial matters concerning your son." My heart stopped. "Financial matters? What do you mean? I'd rather not discuss details over the phone. Could you come into the office this afternoon? It's important." I promised I would, though my hands shook as I hung up. That afternoon, when Ethan was at work, I went to his company's towering glass office building. Adrian, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, sat me down in a small conference room. He laid out a folder filled with documents. "Mrs. Davis," he said gently, "we've discovered your son has been diverting company funds into your bank account, then withdrawing them. Over $50,000 in the past 6 months. I stared at the papers, my throat dry. "That's not possible. I never touched that money." "We believe you," Adrian assured me. "Based on what we've seen, your son controls your finances entirely, but legally, your name is tied to the transactions. Unless you file a complaint, you could be implicated." My vision blurred. I was trapped yet again, this time as an unwitting accomplice to corporate theft. "You need to understand," Adrian continued, lowering his voice. "This isn't just about money. If you stay silent, you may lose everything. But if you speak up, you can clear your name." I left the office in a daze. Betray my son, or risk going down with him. The choice tore at me, but the universe wasn't done pressing me. That weekend, Savannah invited friends over for lunch. Among them was a woman who made my heart leap. Evelyn, my younger sister, whom I hadn't seen in years. She greeted me formally, pretending not to know me in front of Savannah and the others, but her eyes never left me. She saw the makeup too carefully applied, the stiffness in my movements, the bruise hidden beneath my collar. In the kitchen, when the others weren't looking, she leaned in. "Monica, what's going on? You're not yourself." I opened my mouth to deny it, to repeat the lies Ethan drilled into me, but Evelyn's eyes held mine, steady, unyielding, filled with the kind of love only a sister can have. For the first time in years, someone truly saw me, and I knew she knew the truth. After lunch, she whispered as she left, "We'll talk soon." My world spun. Clarice had proof. Adrian had exposed fraud. Evelyn had noticed the bruises. The walls of silence I had built were crumbling fast. That night, Ethan leaned close as he passed me in the hall. His voice was soft, but deadly. "Remember, Mom, one word to anyone, and you'll regret it." I'll make sure you die alone, with nothing. I nodded quickly, but my heart wasn't in it. Not this time, because I now had a choice. I had 1 hour to decide. Keep obeying or break free. The morning of the confrontation began like any other. The house smelled of coffee and fried eggs. I moved silently in the kitchen, setting the table exactly the way Ethan liked. His tie was already knotted, his shoes polished, his phone buzzing with messages from work. He sat at the head of the table, scrolling, barely acknowledging me. But something inside me was different that day. The bruises on my arms still ached. My lip was tender, my back stiff from the last time he shoved me against the wall. But deeper than the pain was something new. A spark, faint but steady. A voice inside me whispering, "Enough." He glanced at his watch. "We'll leave for the bank at 9:30. You'll sign the papers, and this nonsense will be over." I froze. He meant the papers that would absolve him of the financial fraud, the ones that would make me complicit in his thefts. I took a deep breath. My hands trembled as I set down his coffee cup. "I'm not signing anything." The room went silent. His fork clattered against the plate. Slowly, he looked up, his eyes narrowing. "What did you just say?" I said no. I whispered, my voice shaking but firm. "I'm not going to the bank. I'm not signing those papers." For a moment, he just stared at me. Then he stood, towering over me like a storm, his face twisted with rage. "You ungrateful old woman," he hissed. "Do you think anyone will believe you? You're nothing without me. Nothing." He stepped closer, his hand raised. I braced myself for the slap I knew was coming. My heart pounded in my chest. But before his hand could fall, a knock came at the door. "Monica? Are you all right?" It was Clarice, my neighbor. Her voice carried through the hallway. Ethan froze. His hand hovered in the air, then slowly lowered. His mask of rage cracked, but only for a moment. He turned toward the door, pasted on a fake smile, and opened it. "Clarice," he said smoothly, his voice dripping with charm. "Good to see you. Mom's fine. She just burned the toast. That's all." You know how she gets worked up about little things. But Clarice's eyes flicked from his forced smile to my trembling figure in the kitchen. She didn't believe him. Behind her, another figure appeared. Brenda, a district attorney's officer whom Clarice had secretly contacted days before. She stepped forward, holding a folder in her hand. "Mr. Davis," Brenda said firmly, "we need to speak with your mother, and with you." Ethan's smile faltered. "What is this about?" "It's about financial fraud," Brenda replied coolly. "And domestic abuse, we have evidence." Before Ethan could respond, 2 police officers stepped into the doorway. The air in the house shifted. My breath caught as I realized what was happening. "Ethan Davis," one officer said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "You're under arrest." The color drained from his face. "This is insane." "I didn't do anything." He spun toward me, his eyes blazing with fury. "Mom, tell them this is a mistake." But I stayed silent. For the first time in years, I didn't flinch under his glare. I didn't lower my eyes. I met his gaze head on. "No," I said softly. "It's not a mistake." The officers moved quickly, cuffing his wrists behind his back. He thrashed, shouted, tried to twist free, but it was no use. "You'll regret this, Mom," he screamed as they dragged him toward the door. "You think you're safe? You think anyone will believe you? You're nothing without me." The door slammed shut behind them. The house was quiet again. For the first time in years, I was alone, not abandoned, but free. My knees gave out, and I sank into a chair, my chest heaving, tears spilling down my cheeks. Relief, fear, heartbreak, all tangled together in a storm I couldn't untangle. But it wasn't over. Not yet. From jail, Ethan found a way to reach me. Days later, a letter arrived in the mail. His handwriting was sharp, angry. "Dear Mom," it began. "You think you've won, but you forget. I know your secrets. Do you remember the Williams case at Sullivan and Associates? Do you remember the documents you altered? If I tell the authorities, you'll go to prison. Obstruction of justice, Mom. That's a crime. And if that's not enough, I have proof of the money you took under the table. Tax evasion. You're no saint. You're as guilty as me. My hands trembled as I read. He was blackmailing me, even from behind bars. He was using my past mistakes, small, foolish things I had done decades ago at the law firm, against me. For a moment, the fear came rushing back. What if he was right? What if I lost everything anyway? But then Brenda's words echoed in my mind. Secrets only have power if you hide them. So I made a choice. Instead of cowering, I confessed. I stood before reporters, cameras flashing, and told the truth. I admitted the mistakes I had made years ago, the altered documents, the undeclared gifts. I laid my shame bare for the world to see, and in doing so, I took away Ethan's last weapon. He could no longer hold my past over me. He had nothing left to control me with. That night, for the first time in years, I locked the door to my house, turned off the lights, and climbed into bed. My body still ached. My heart still carried scars. But my mind was finally at peace. For the first time in years, I slept without fear. The days after Ethan's arrest felt unreal. For so long, I had lived under the weight of his footsteps, his demands, his rage. The silence in the house was almost frightening. I would catch myself listening for the slam of the front door, the bark of his orders, the sharpness in his tone. But the house stayed quiet. For the first time in years, it was my silence, my peace. Brenda, the district attorney's officer, came by one morning with paperwork in her hands. Good news, Monica, she said, setting the documents on my kitchen table. The house is legally yours again. Ethan's name was added fraudulently. A judge has already ruled in your favor. I picked up the papers with trembling hands. My house, the home I had built with decades of sacrifice, was mine again. No signatures could take it from me this time. Then she smiled gently. There's more. Ethan's company has agreed to compensate you. They uncovered additional fraud, but they want your cooperation in testifying. They'll pay you $50,000 in restitution. And she paused, her eyes warm. They've also offered you a position, consulting, part-time, with full benefits. They said someone with 40 years of experience and your reputation could help rebuild what Ethan destroyed. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. $50,000. A job, after years of being treated like a beggar in my own home. Here was proof that I was still valuable, still capable, still me. I accepted, of course. Not for the money, but for the dignity. Walking into that office, being introduced not as Ethan's mother, but as Monica Davis, consultant, it felt like stepping out of the shadows. Meanwhile, Ethan sat in jail awaiting trial. The charges stacked against him were heavy. Domestic abuse, financial fraud, embezzlement, intimidation, blackmail. Brenda said he could be facing 10 to 15 years. Sometimes, I still hear his voice. In voicemails from the jail, he shifts between fury and desperation. One moment, he curses me, calls me a traitor. The next, he weeps, begging me to forgive him, to remember that he's still my son. And that's the hardest part. He is my son, the boy I once held against my chest, the boy who drew me pictures in crayon, the boy who whispered, "I love you, Mom," before bed. That boy is gone now, buried under greed and anger. But somewhere deep inside, a part of me still aches for him. Yet I know one thing with absolute certainty. I will never be his victim again. I've learned that love doesn't mean surrender. That being a mother doesn't mean erasing yourself. That silence only feeds abuse. I once thought my secrets would destroy me. That the mistakes I made years ago at the law firm would be the chains that kept me in Ethan's control. But I was wrong, because secrets only have power if you keep them hidden. When I spoke them aloud, when I pulled them into the light, Ethan's last weapon shattered in his hands, and with it, so did his hold over me. Now, my days are simple again. I wake up early, but not because someone orders me to. I cook breakfast for myself. I water the plants. Sometimes, I sit on the porch with Clarice, sipping tea while the sun rises. I laugh more than I used to. I cry, too, but the tears are different now. They're not from fear. They're from release. I'm not naive. Healing won't be instant. I still flinch when I hear raised voices. I still feel panic when someone knocks unexpectedly at the door. But each day, I take back a little more of myself. And each day, I remind myself, and anyone who will listen, of one final truth. No matter how deep the control, no matter how strong the chains, there is always a way out. It may take courage you don't think you have. It may cost you everything you thought you were protecting, but freedom is worth it. So if you are listening to my story and find pieces of yourself in it, please, don't stay silent. Don't let fear keep you prisoner. Don't let shame convince you that you deserve it. You don't. Secrets only have power if you keep them hidden. Speak out. Seek help. Choose freedom, because no matter how many years you've lived in the shadows, it is never too late to step into the light. And that is how I finally found mine.